into reality, where we have our esteemed guests for the discussion to enlighten us with their experience and wisdom to propel us into the world of entrepreneurship. I now extend the warm welcome to Mr. Abhishek Pitti and Mr. Prajakt Raut and Professor Somshekhar Bhattacharya to come on to the stage. I now request that Professor Somshekhar Bhattacharya to honor our guest with a bouquet to express our gratitude. Now, our first guest, Mr. Abhishek Pitti, founder and CEO of Nitro Network and IBC Media. Mr. Abhishek is an expert in entrepreneurship, business strategy, fundraising, private equity, management consulting, product management, and list goes on. Mr. Abhishek has a diverse range of industry expertise, right from Web 3.0, aerospace, infrastructure, till the recent blockchain. He is on a mission to change the world through education, innovation, and investing in emerging technologies. His Northern Star is to educate 1 million developers and invest in 1,000 crazy emerging techs. We are honored to have you here, sir. Okay. Now I would like Mr. Professor Som Bhattacharya to honor our guest, Mr. Prajakt Raut, with a bouquet. Mr. Prajakt Raut, he is a co-founder and managing partner of Carnet Capital, a venture capital fund focused on startups recalibrating Indian value chains. He was also a founder of Amplify, a company that provides startup access to capital and deep engaged mentoring. Mr. Prajakt is an entrepreneur, to be more frank, entrepreneur evangelist with over 30 years of multifaceted experience as an entrepreneur, professional, startup ecosystem builder, and an angel investor. He has been an active participant in ecosystem of startups in India for the past 20 years. We are honored to have you here, sir. And now, I'm delighted to introduce Professor Somshekhar Bhattacharya, who will be presiding over this panel discussion. Professor Bhattacharya is an associate professor at Indian Institute of Management, Nagpur, with over 16 years of experience in academics and industry. Professor Bhattacharya research interests lie in the areas of strategy and entrepreneurship. He has published several research papers and articles. He has also conducted several workshops and training programs on various topics such as people analytics, productivity, efficiency improvement. We are excited to have you, sir. And now I hand over the event to you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So, welcome to this panel on Innovation Forge, transforming ideas into reality. So, we'll have some, discussion points here. The first question that I have to the panelists is, how has the technology startup landscape, how has it evolved post-COVID era?
First off, thank you so much, the organizing committee, the board of governors at IIM Nagpur and the management, to you, Mr. Professor Som, and all the students. First off, I would like to thank the students for being so warm. Last night, I was at the sports center and we played 5 games of badminton until like 3 a.m. That was awesome. So you guys are really cool to hang out with. And I want to thank all the students who, gave me that opportunity. Now, coming to the question of what has changed, there are 2 buckets of answers to this question. One is what has changed from a technology frontier, and two, what has changed from a venture capital process perspective. So if you look at the technology, I would say the world has changed 3 times in the last 5 years. What has changed on the technology frontier? Number one, the technology frontier, there are 3 new technologies that are horizontal technologies that have taken a leap of growth from where they were in the past. And what do you mean by horizontal technologies? These are industry agnostic technologies. They will have applications, they will affect every single industry, they will affect you in so many ways, in all use cases that you apply on a daily basis. And these 3 technologies have been, one is the entire blockchain revolution, the decentralization revolution that evolved since 2018. I say 2018 even though it was invented in 2008 is because the smart contract technology came into marriage with blockchain in around 2017. The second is obviously the more recent one, which is the generation AI technology, which you are obviously, if you have, how many people here use ChatGPT? How many people use ChatGPT to do homework? Got you. So point being, that's the second one. The third one that you will soon see, in your next few years will be the entire virtual reality and AR and VR that is enabled by the network technology that is taking off, right? Like the 5Gs and the 6Gs are going mainstream. So everything that you see in the movies will see come real. And how many people have seen a movie called Ready Player One? Okay, if you have not seen that movie, guys, and you're doing an MBA and you want to, looking at technology, you need to go watch that movie. And I tell you, if you watch that movie, you will change whatever career you have and go into technology. That's what's going to happen. So, Ready Player One, right? Okay, that's on the process of venture capital. I would let Prajakt give some more insight.
Thank you, and delighted to be a part of this panel. Professor Shom, I'll address it slightly differently, not from what's changed in technology, but what's changed from an opportunity point of view. I think a couple of things have fundamentally shifted. If you think about what was happening earlier before COVID, a lot of technology was used for optimizing processes, automating processes. But post-COVID, one of the words that has come into every boardroom across the globe, whether it's small, medium, large companies, is how to build what they call supply chain resilience. And supply chain resilience is nothing but how to diversify risk, which means the number of stakeholders that every entity is dealing with these days has increased significantly. Now, therefore, a lot of applications and technology that is being developed, and which is finding a lot more traction, rather than just optimizing existing processes, which will continue to happen, are technologies that are synchronizing between all these different stakeholders and stitching things together that enables organizations to build what is called supply chain resilience. And for aspiring entrepreneurs who might want to consider getting into entrepreneurship, don't look at just the obvious factors that are visible in terms of where the gaps, etc. are. Think in terms of if large corporations were to build operational, competencies or around supply chain or resilience in their supply chain, what are the kind of things that will need to be stitched together? The other thing that has happened is the democratization of access to capital, not just in the tier 1, 2, 3 cities, but even if you go to places like Nagpur, for example, has an active angel network. If you go to places like Indore, Dehradun, Coimbatore, almost 100 cities that I can name in India where there are now thriving angel investor networks. Of course, the dynamics of how capital is raised, the valuations, etc., all of that has got moderated and all of that has got a little more saner, but all for good. But I think it's a great time for anybody to consider entrepreneurship as a career option. If I were young, that would be my first choice for stepping out of something like this.
Can I add one point here? So I think one of the other things that has changed in the last 5 years is the opportunity cost for qualified entrepreneurs. I mean, if you if I assume everybody here is from IIM Nagpur, I think one of the things you have to understand is your opportunity cost is no more building $1 billion company. It's no more building a $10 billion company. It has become, to build a $1 trillion company. Because if you look at Bill Gates, if you look at Steve Jobs, they have created a $1 trillion company in one generation, which never happened in the last century, right? So your opportunity as an entrepreneur has gone up. Opportunity cost, not opportunity. The second thing, what do you think the value of your idea today is? If you have an idea and you are a qualified entrepreneur, what is the value of that idea? I'll tell you, it has gone up from somewhere around $100,000 to now $1 million. So the value of your idea has gone up, the value of your opportunity has gone up significantly.
Okay, good. So this brings me to the next question. What is the role of mentorship for technology startups?
I cannot enough stress on the need for mentoring. Mentoring at any stage of the company is important. Even if you think of large companies, they have advisory boards, they have boards. And what is a board? A board is nothing but a set of people who will bring an outside perspective and, in a sense, guide the top leadership of large organizations. And that role is even more important in the early stages of a company because you're dealing with unpredictability. You're dealing with assumptions that you hope will play out in that marketplace, and therefore somebody who can guide you in terms of validating some of the assumptions that you're making, challenging some of those assumptions, and asking you questions that you may not necessarily be aware of. That's the role of a mentor. And I keep on telling people that, when you think of becoming an entrepreneur, don't rush to find an investor. In fact, try and find either a customer or most certainly find a few mentors. Now, what is a mentor? A lot of times, one of the mistakes that we see a lot of people doing is when they want to find a mentor, they find somebody who's got a star name, something that will look good on a PowerPoint when you show it to investors. No, that's not what a mentor's role is about. It's not about adding some weight onto your team. A good mentor is somebody who is as excited about the potential of what you're building, is willing to really be a bouncing board for ideas, who's willing to argue and to be argued against, who's willing to, sort of live with you. And not just in terms of giving business advice, but it was also in many ways somebody who will be able to be emotional support, because the things are never going to be, easy. It's always, you see this kind of a chart that people project. It's never going to be like that. It's always going to be lots of rough ups and downs and stuff. A mentor, therefore, is extremely important, but you may not necessarily have one mentor. A lot of times entrepreneurs are good at building a product, but they may not necessarily have the experience or understanding of building a business around that product. And therefore, surround yourself with people who will give you advice on some of the aspects that you need to do to really get that product onto that market and build a strong business behind that product.
I would like to share a more business school student perspective. I was in your shoes a few years back, and one of the things I want to tell you is out of the 4,000 startups a venture capital company reviews, somebody wants to guess how many startups get funded by a Series A investor? 20. That's point number one. The death rate in the startup community is about 95%, right? And I wish at some point somebody at business school had told me what exactly do I have to do to make sure I'm not one of them. And it turns out it's a very simple mathematical calculation. I wish I had gone to my, Harvard entrepreneurial professor and I would have asked him what those numbers are. Because when you go to a VC, 2 years later after you start a startup, they're going to look at exactly that same math, which is what is your market size, what are your gross margins, and do you have a customer, right? A lot of us actually forget to do that basic math. It's called founder's math. And the mentors is where this all comes from. if you go to find a mentor on day one, I would say forget everything. If you like to do entrepreneurship, first go find a mentor and then go find a problem. Because you will save yourself 3 years in the best case and at least 2 years in the worst case. If the company fails, you lost around 2 years. If the company succeeds and is a mediocre success and you don't get capital, you will shut it down in 3 years. So my recommendation to you is, if you want to do anything to do with entrepreneurship, take your professors home, sit with them, give them cookies and ask them, what math do I have to do to make sure that my startup is successful when I go to a venture capital firm? Because ultimately you will need capital at some point. So.
But Abhishek and Professor Somes, if it's okay, let me just contextualize this 90% number, because a lot of times when we talk about entrepreneurship, we almost always talk about it from a VC, venture capital headset, in terms of our definition of entrepreneurship is very venture capital led, exponentially scalable companies that will be able to raise rounds and rounds of capital. And if you go on that journey, it is right that 90% of the companies are not able to meet the expectations of what the next round of investors would be, and therefore you could consider them a failure from a investor's point of view, because I invested money and I'm not able to exit from that or get my returns. But when you think of entrepreneurship as a dhanda, as a business, as something that you will be able to, basically saying that, look, can I make something that I'm able to sell it for at what it costs me lesser to produce and service. 99% of businesses that you see around, or at least 90% of the businesses that you see around, are not venture capital fundable businesses, but they are fundamentally stable, strong businesses. There is nothing wrong in saying, if I want to make handmade shoes, or I want to make craft goods, or I want to be, say, for example, in the furniture making business, that's entrepreneurship as well. Unfortunately, we don't think about that in there, because the narrative has been very venture capital led. In those kinds of businesses, which are fundamentally strong businesses, not venture capital, the death rate is not 90%, it is 10%. Yes, the growth, might be slower than what you had expected. You may have at your targets of saying, 3 साल में ये होना है, 5 साल में होना है, 5 साल के बदले 10 लग जाएंगे, कोई नहीं. But at least if you keep on that journey, there will be, there is a possibility of creating healthy businesses. So when we talk about 90%, it is the death rate between venture capital, within the venture capital world, and I think I just wanted to contextualize as that, and that's important as well. I'm not undermining that, because that's an ecosystem that supports a lot of innovation and ideas that need to be nurtured, etc. But those are experiments. Instead of calling it startups, let's call them, saying, okay, there are hundreds of experiments that get funded. Some of them work and become startups. Others, people learn and then they, grow up and do something else.
So my next question is, what are the major headwinds which are coming for technology startups?
I think let's speak of this issue at both India level as well as global. I think the number one thing from an India perspective, it's the foundational questions that we should ask as a country. Why do all the tier 1 startups, tier 1 venture capital firms register in jurisdictions like Singapore? Why do entrepreneurs who are building billion-dollar companies in the next generation businesses or product companies that are coming out of India are not living in India anymore? Why are these people going to Dubai? Why are these people going to other jurisdictions that are more enabling when it comes to new tech development? So somewhere we, as a country, I feel that we are not addressing the main issue, which is how do we make India as a country where people want to come to India to register companies, come to India to build product companies. Why not, right? We have 1.5 million developers graduating. We have the highest number of developers in the world graduating from our schools. We have the best talent. We have the largest development offices. We have the largest service companies in the world. Then why are the entrepreneurs running away? Why are the venture capital funds registering outside the country? I think that is something that is a policy regulatory question that we need to address as a country to enable, and I think the narrative has to change from not India to why not India, right? I think that is the fundamental question that our leaders in the country has to address. Second, from a global perspective, I think the challenge will be to adopt the new technology and the new ways of doing business. And that means that the fundamental problem statements are going to change. The fundamental solutions are going to change. And that is something, an entrepreneurial agenda that we need to look at as entrepreneurs who are looking to do new age technologies. But one thing assuring there is that there is more capital available. There is more investors. The funding environment has gone from only Silicon Valley, only Bangalore, to a global schema. You know, I'll tell you my example. The new age fundraising module allows you to raise millions of dollars in few days. For example, I raised about $40 million in 3 days in 2018. You know, you just have to know the new age tools to raise capital. So that's one of the assuring, you know, avenue that we have as entrepreneurs, but definitely the use cases that age-old problems we're coming up with has changed with new technologies.
I completely second what you said in terms of you need a more enabling environment. There is a lot that the government is doing, but a lot needs to be done. There's a whole bunch of things like angel tax and stuff which needs a lot more ironing out. And that's certainly one headwind. But the other headwind, and I'll talk in the context of, say, for example, enterprise-facing or B2B startup, because there are a bunch of people from the industry here as well. When you talk about creating, or when you create solutions that are enterprise-facing, when you're selling to large enterprises, even if you were not a startup, if you were a regular technology company, you would take a few quarters to close that deal. But when you're a startup, just getting to that decision maker and explaining your value proposition can sometimes take a few quarters. And therefore, in the early stages, what I advise entrepreneurs to do is to do man-to-man marketing in terms of which 5 customers that you want to target and what kind of people you might want to connect with who can make warm introductions and evangelize your value proposition to those companies, and then collectively work with them. Worry about the first 5 enterprise customers that you will engage with, maybe convert 2 of them. The journey after that will be a lot smoother rather than saying product banata hu, uske baad let me try and figure out which 100 customers I can send emails out to. That really doesn't work. So in a way, it's a headwind that is self-created rather than environmental headwinds that are enabling or disabling the ecosystem in that way.
Okay. So what are the major tailwinds which are supporting technology startups? Major tailwinds.
Well, I mean, in the Indian context, India is the epicenter of action for the entire world. Geopolitical dynamics have ensured that we are in a position where, we are talking about a $5 trillion economy. Professor Vadhva in the morning suggested that we need to think in terms of $10 trillion. And it's not a question, and if it's a question of whether we will do it by 2034 or we'll do it by, a couple of years earlier. And in our country, if you think about the geopolitical dynamics that are playing out, the need for supply chain resilience, etc., and what people normally call as China +1, where a lot of companies are trying to move away from China, India should have been an obvious choice. The reason why we are not yet an obvious choice for a lot of companies to directly shift from China to India is because perhaps they don't have the confidence that we will be delivered as reliably as companies would like to. And therefore, the tailwinds are that any technology company that is able to help people get the confidence that India can deliver, or companies in India can deliver, or ecosystems in India can deliver to their requirements, will have significant tailwinds. Look, our infrastructure, it will always be work in progress, and it will probably never be in your generation be able to catch up to the needs that will be there. And therefore, the only way we can sort of be a reliable partner to the world is if we leverage technology to optimize our value chain. Think about what the value chain means: goods and supply, goods and services value chain, people and talent value chain, and optimizing our assets and infrastructure. If we are able to do some of these things, and therefore any technologies that are helping in some of these areas, at least I believe, would have significant tailwinds.
My next question is, can there be a Silicon Valley outpost in India? Is it possible?
I think Silicon Valley Outpost was created over 2 decades, 2 generations, not one actually. In fact, I would say 3 now. So absolutely, I think the Silicon Valley Outpost is being created right now in Austin, Texas, New York, and many other locations, Israel. So these are all become hotspots globally. And I think it'll continue to happen in jurisdictions like Dubai has become a hotspot. Singapore has been a hotspot. I would hate to see like India not leading that agenda because I think we have all the other ingredients, from politics to talent to education, language, middle class, entrepreneurs, talent, individuals here. However, I think we are somewhere not addressing the core of the problem. But on the entrepreneurial front, I think one thing that I would like to suggest is, guys, make sure you take advantage of the opportunity. If you are an MBA sitting in this room, I will tell you that you are some of the most qualified entrepreneurs out there, because you know to do exactly what the technical entrepreneurs get it wrong. They don't think like an investor, but you know what fiduciary duty means. You know what market size means. You know what technical entrepreneurial finance means. So if you are a qualified entrepreneur and you want to make $1 billion, like honestly, there are a few things that you can do, which I can speak in the end as a quick piece of advice, but I would say take care of this opportunity and don't let it pass, for sure. Like Prajakt said, if I were in your shoes, I will not ignore entrepreneurship today.
The Silicon Valley model of nurturing entrepreneurs and providing them with an enabling environment is already happening in many places. We may not have produced companies that have become, something darlings of the world where people can, oh wow, this came from this accelerator or incubator and stuff. But I met 3 companies in the accelerator in this institution, phenomenal companies. Each of them have the potential to become, really strong brands in themselves. And the kind of work that people like Shashi Chaudhary are doing in places like Nagpur, getting a bunch of investors to support early stage companies. Phenomenal, they've done 5 companies already. He's already done several companies more. The kind of incubation center that I saw here is absolutely great. And this kind of stuff is already happening in hundreds of cities. And I'll give you one example of a bunch of businessmen who have come together in Coimbatore with the intent of saying, yaar, hum log na thoda paise company mein dalenge, let's figure out what happens. This is social capital, in the sense, just think about it, that we have given away this money. It may come back, and it has, by the way, but they got together with saying collectively, let's put money into startups. And I'll illustrate with one small example, which I thought was very beautiful. The first case that they invested in was a kid who had come to them with a very simple concept and a drawing, saying, yaar, foreign pictures mein sab sabzi wale अच्छे दिखते हैं, मेरे देश में ऐसे सब्जी वाले क्यों नहीं है? Why do our vegetable vendors look so run down and all of these kinds of things? And he had a foreign European, vegetable seller with uniform, nicely arranged carts and so on. And he says, gentlemen, I want to make 2 carts like this. I need 1 lakh rupees to make these 2 carts. These people mentored him, explained to him that, look, it's a fantastic model, but they gave him, instead of 1 lakh, they gave him 10 lakh rupees. Between about 10, 15, 20 people, everybody contributed 1 lakh, 2 lakhs. In 1.5 years' time, this person had 50 carts in Coimbatore, and in 1.5 years' time, Big Basket had given an offer to acquire that company. Simple idea. It's not a technology company. It's nothing. Just basic, simple photograph that child had, which is saying that, look, I want my country's vegetable vendors to look as nice and elegant as this company. But this is the kind of stuff that is happening. It's not celebrated because we are not really, I mean, this may still have been a local phenomenon. At some stage, maybe you'll hear about it because this company has gone all India and stuff like that. But that magic has already started happening.
Okay, so, transforming ideas into reality. Y Combinator, Paul Graham has done phenomenal work. So any parallel lessons for India, or is the model dated?
I think Y Combinator model has been around for over 30 years, where entrepreneurs, the top entrepreneurs are going to get early stage capital. And I don't know how many people know Y Combinator and the model they run, but it is a early stage accelerator, basically for early good entrepreneurs to go get capital from some renowned names in the valley. And this model has been around from the day one, I would say, or day like maybe 300. But I think this model is changing just because there is a, like Prajakt said in the beginning, there is a democratization of capital that is happening. That means there are now global angel investors, there are global venture capital firms that are putting in money at early stage ideas. It doesn't matter which geography you come from, it doesn't matter what's your background. If you have a great idea and you have the ability to execute on this idea, getting capital today is not an issue. I think you just have to do the right things, do the right math, present your idea in the right light to the right people, and you get capital. So I would say capital is the least of your problems, but I think some of us think capital is the biggest problem. That is not the problem, because the Y Combinators of the world will soon adapt to this new democratization, decentralization of capital allocation. And frankly, we used to think venture capital people are like gods, but in the times to come, from 10 years from now, I think the entrepreneurs are the gods, because the cost of capital will eventually reduce because of democratization, and the access to capital is also going to reduce.
And I hadn't seen it from that perspective, but when we mentioned it, it just becomes very clear to me. 30 years ago when Y Combinator started, or whatever, 25 years ago when it started, the value proposition was access to space, access to capital, access to mentoring. None of them were available freely. Now, actually, all of them are available. You can go to a co-working space, or you can go to an incubation center. You can raise money through a variety of platforms, and mentoring has become mainstream in many ways. And therefore, you're right, that model will disrupt. But the need for structured programs where ideas are nurtured, curated, and assisted in taking to that next level, that concept stage, and I think we need to build enabling ecosystems around that. But it's not going to be easy for anybody to raise capital, whether you're a great startup or you're starting up earlier or whatever. It is always going to be a challenge raising capital. But a lot of times what happens is, when somebody wants to start up, especially young students, for example, if you want to experiment with a startup, you think in terms of, where will I find 2 crores from, where will I find at least 1 crore from, or maybe 50 lakhs from? Don't. Think about how much money you need to get to a level where you can survive. And that usually is under 25 lakhs. 9 out of 10 cases I've seen would be about, if you have 25 lakhs, that should be okay. In many cases, even lesser, if you need that. But if you ask 25 lakhs from an institutional investor, it is going to be a 6-month process, at least if your idea is good, and never if the idea is not something, or maybe you're not able to communicate. But if you go to people within your network and ask 25 people to put 50,000 into your company, you would probably be able to collect 12, 15 lakhs in a matter of, a couple of months, if not more and stuff. So don't think of, you will need capital. If you don't have your own, you will probably need capital, but think in terms of range of 10 lakhs to 25 lakh rupees, and figure out how you can get that money from a bunch of people that you know within your community, your friends, your parents' friends, your friends' parents, all of those kinds of people. Or maybe, the professors and the other people that you're connected with, and say, look, I need 25 lakh rupees, and I'm collecting it for 25 individuals with a minimum contribution of 1 lakh. And that too, you don't need all the money today. You probably can say, look, why don't you pay me 50,000 now, and maybe in 6 months' time, I'll take another 50,000. You will get your startup, off the ground really in about a month's time, rather than spending 6 months trying to change institutional investors.
Can I make a comment? So, Prajakt, I'm going to basically present an entrepreneurial view. However, I agree with Prajakt when he said this view from a VC perspective, right? I'll tell you what Paul Graham would say about this, or even Mark Cuban will say. Like, first off, you know, as an investor, yes, I want you to put your own money into the startup because I want to see that you're committed to the idea, right? Because if I give you money, and what if you run away tomorrow and then have no control, right? But as an entrepreneur and as a founder, I would say, why will I put in my money? When there is so much money available for me to go get access to, and people are taking so much equity for giving me that capital, and they are willing to take the risk. I would rather find an investor who is willing to take the risk in the idea that I have come up with. I have the right business case for it. I have a good team for it. So if I were you, I would go find that minimum viable team, you know, and there needs to be 3 people. A hustler who knows how to raise capital, a product person who knows how to build tech, and a person who can sell. If you have these 3 people and you have a good idea, and you can do a good presentation, and you can do mathematics, you have everything you need to go raise minimum capital from an investor whose job is to take risks and give you money. And if somebody tells you, no, you don't do that job, you put in money and then prove the idea, then come to me, then he's not doing his job to take the risk, evaluate that risk, evaluate the team, and give you money. That's what early stage seed capital looks like. So as a founder, unless and until you have strong conviction in something that this is going to work, and this is something that you don't want to give equity for early stage, then you do it. But unless and until, like, and first of all, I'll advise you against it, because even Facebook had the same probabilities of, you know, shutting down in 50%, which is 50% in the early stage. Like, why would you take that risk? Like, why would you burn a relationship with your professor, your uncle, aunt, and mother, parents, and then put your own money? Like, and frankly, like, a lot of people who are founders advise against it, respect to what the VC community has to say. But as an investor, I can appreciate it. Today, I'm an investor, and I want to see commitment from you. I want to make sure that you have that social pressure to be committed to the idea. It makes my case stronger to prove to my LP saying that this guy has put in 15 lakhs of his own money and his friend's money to actually start a company. But I don't think that is required anymore. I mean, especially now, when you as an entrepreneur based here in India, in Nagpur, which probably international community doesn't hear about often. But now it's not about Nagpur. It's about whether you have access to internet and whether you can post your business case online successfully. That's my point.
I agree with you. And my only point was that if you try raising capital from investors, and if you don't get it, don't give up on the idea. There are other ways in which you will be able to do it. By all means, because there are forums available in which, and see, for an investor, you guys are customers, right? Much like any other, what is our raw material? Our raw material, our stock is the capital that we have raised from other people. We want to deploy that. We want to deploy that in what? In companies like yours. How do we make money? We make money when your company succeeds. So therefore, you're customers to us. But if that idea, for whatever reason, maybe because of our lack of understanding or your lack of ability or whatever the reasons, if we feel that that is not, or lots of investors feel that that's not an idea that is worth supporting at the initial stages, in which case, all I'm saying is don't give up. There are other ways in which you will be able to raise that capital. Don't think in terms of what you need for 1.5 years. Think of how much money you need for the first 6 months, and that's usually a very, very limited amount of money that most of us will be able to pull together with small contributions from a large number of people within our networks.
Another point that I want your inputs on is regarding, there are a lot of large firms which are there. And we often see a startup large firm collaboration. Startups can get knowledge, mentoring, capital, market. But why has this narrative not picked on, the startup large firm collaboration?
Professor Som, we've passed 40 minutes. I haven't seen anybody put a red flag or whatever. So, she's already put it.
Just a quick bite.
It's important. Industry startup collaboration is extremely important, but it's hard for a lot of large corporations to adopt transformative innovations because A, They have stock market pressures. They have to, they have to be predictable and consistent in what they're doing, and therefore it's very hard for them to throw away the baby with the bathwater, so to say, or as they would say in other words, nurture the cannibal within the family. And also because they've got assets, infrastructure, processes that have been, sort of nurtured over several decades, it's very hard for them to really transition from that. But the way to do this is to really create an ecosystem, and Abhishek has a bunch of ideas around that, how some of these innovations can be created as POCs for them outside of the realities of their corporate world, which they can then adopt into.
A quick note, I am hiring interns, volunteers to work on exactly the same initiative we are talking about, where we want to work with the government, we want to work with the research institutions like IIM Nagpur, professors like Professor Som, to create industry-based association collaborated sandboxes where startups can be married to associations and industries and then adopted into those respective industries with all access to customers, which will increase the odds of getting product market fit, startup validations. I believe Prajakt has been working on something similar in one industry, which is supply chain. We are trying to build something more central, organized with the government. So if you are interested in startup ecosystem building investments, this would be a great opportunity for building a career in venture capital as well as being an entrepreneur. So if you're interested, please hit me up. And final point, if you want to find me, let's play badminton tonight.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions from the audience? Maybe one question. No, then we are good. Thank you.
Thank you for such a wonderful panel discussion. I believe that we learned more about mentoring, funding, and challenges in a startup environment. It was a pleasure to have such an insightful and a thought-provoking panel discussion, sir. I would now request Professor Somshekhar Bhattacharya, sir, to give the mementos to our guests. Respected guests, IIM Nagpur believes in sustainable development. We have planted tree samplings in your honor in Simplipal National Park, Odisha. The certificates will be mailed to you shortly. Thank you, sir. Once again, we would like to thank all the guests for taking their moment of their valuable schedule and sharing their expertise, which made this event a success. We hope that this discussion has been informative and engaging for everyone involved. I would also like to thank our silver partner, Alwalia Contracts India Limited, Sustainable Energy Partner, Indian Oil, Bronze Partner, AWS, Media Partner, Tech Mahindra, Business Today, Gifting Partner, Boat, Exclusive Radio Partner, Red FM 93.5, Bachate Ravo, Digital and Creative Partner, Buffalo Soldiers, and other submit partners, Spacewood, Infinity, Fugo, Royal Safe Company, Soroco, and Ingenious India Limited. Last but not least, we would like to thank all the participants. I now request Shreyas Davde, a student of IIM Nagpur, to grace the crowd with some shayari.